Right. Welcome everyone. This is our fifth training
Yeah.
it's going to be our fifth training that's going to be happening for our therapist training program. We're in the not yet halfway done almost, but we are in the space where we are now compounding on a lot of the content that we have covered. And today is going to be a day that really kind of challenges and us. It kind of helps us understand balance. Most of the stuff that we've done so far, it's all about attunement. It's all about really recognizing the amount of slowness that is required in the therapy room in order for it to be effective. For us to slow down our nervous system, for us to be able to perceive and review all the things that are there in the room. All of those things are elements that we are it's very important for us to be very mindful for. However, when we're moving into Gestalt, there's a little bit more of a dynamic nature to Gestalt. It's a little bit more, the tempo kind of really gets increased. And what it requires is for us to be fully present, to really be in that place of trusting the process. Okay. Today, what we're going to be covering is we're going to be covering three different stages or particularly topics of Gestalt, right? Number one is going to be about empty chair, right? I'm going to show you guys a demonstration about empty chair in terms of the instructions that are given, in terms of the work that needs to happen, right? And I'll show it by demonstrating it. Okay, even online, how do you do an empty chair, right? How can you really set it up for people so that that powerful tool can actually be used, whether it's an online setup or whether it's an in-person setup. Both can kind of take place. Okay, that's number one. Start with that. Number two, right? We're going to work with resistance, right? How do you facilitate resistance? Because Gestalt is all about persistence. It's one of the characteristics that needs to take place in therapy in terms of there's a highlight that happens. There is an exaggeration technique that is used particularly in Gestalt. And all of those things require working with resistance, right? Because it's appropriate, because when you're doing such dynamic pieces of work, it's very appropriate for there to be an ego challenge, right? There's an ego resistance that comes in because there is a certain protective, preservative nature that kind of kicks in. And so, how does the therapist really find that space in order to make it more relational? Doesn't, because you can't lose the attunement, number one. Number two, the power dynamic needs to be understood as well. And number three, you really get to know what does it look like when you have worked with someone's resistance and there's a resolution arc that kind of takes place. You are able to do it in the session completely, right? So it doesn't take too long. And my intention is to show you guys how does that work in action particularly, and what are some of the tools and the techniques that are required in terms of how do you work with resistance. So that's going to be the second one that we're going to be covering. And the third and the final one that we're going to be working with is here and now, right? By this time, we would have really highlighted what does it take to really see the information that is here in the here and now. And I think that's where the real, as a somatic practitioner as well, someone who's done a lot of the trauma work, particularly from a somatic lens, one of the things that Pat Oregon said was that everything that you need to know about the client is present in the here and now in their body at this moment, right? You need to just see them to be able to know what they have gone through, right? And that is the capacity of being present in the moment in the here and now. And again, once you really start using it at a level that you feel very comfortable with, what you will start noticing is that the time it requires to take history of the client, or those biases that sometimes the therapist has, that I will only get to know or build relationship with the client only if I know what has happened to them, that stuff will start to fade away, right? Because particularly in trauma work, there is a risk that if you were to hear or listen to the history of the client, there is a re-traumatization that can take place. Not to say that it never happens, it happens at a particular section of the work. So all of those things are things that we're going to be covering today. Okay. Um, is there anything in terms of housekeeping? We are in day five. We're hoping to kind of
Recording in progress.
we're hoping to sort of release the recordings of it before iftar time. Last time, what happened was that we had to kind of do it at the time of iftar. When we're going to go through any kind of gestalt process, right? It's very important to not break the trance. Okay. I will show you guys how it's done. However, what happens is that when I was developing myself as a therapist, one of the earliest techniques that they teach you, and I was doing my CPPD training, one of the earliest techniques after humanistic, what they teach you is Gestalt. Okay. And the reason why Gestalt is done is because it is a very different dynamic on its own. It's Fritz Perls is the founder of Gestalt Therapy. His way of working is very dynamic in nature. The reason why it's dynamic is because there's so much there's so much trust that needs to be there in your own sense of self in order for you to ask those certain questions. Okay. If you don't ask those certain questions, you're not going to be able to recognize what it kind of takes place, right? So what I'm and I'll show you first in the gestalt that I'm going to be doing, and then I'll show you how to break it down primarily. Okay. The reason why am I doing it on myself, right? And why am I kind of doing it in this particular manner? Is because of two folds. Number one is my intention is to show you guys the 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 my intention is to show you guys the actual debrief that needs to be given. When you're doing a gestalt, it's very important the instructions that are given. Okay. It can't be too specific, because if it's too specific, then what happens is that the client becomes too much in the head, right? In terms of, okay, how am I supposed to do this? The trance breaks away because they're thinking, am I doing it right or am I doing it wrong? Can't do it with that way. Whatever is happening for a reason. It's in the gestalt that you have to really find what is the purpose behind it, what is being shown, what is being seen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the blur so that you guys can see the room, or you guys can see the chairs that are in place, right? So that when I move from one chair to another, I will kind of show. Okay. So I'm hoping you guys can hear it. So in an empty chair technique, what is really taking place? And why are we starting with empty chair? Okay. Gestalt is all about being in the here and now, right? And one of the tools that they use is called an empty chair. Empty chair is basically what happens is that you project a certain person, persona, object, part, depends on what language you're using, onto the chair. And what you're doing is you're providing that sort of like resolution, that is the conflict that is internalized. You're allowing that to be seen and expressed on an external level. Okay. The main intention is for it to be brought forward, right? So, for example, if there's a conflict that is being seen in the session by the therapist. So, for example, the client says, I want to, let's do a simple one, right? I want to go abroad, right? And make my life go abroad to study. That's one. I want to go abroad to study, but I don't want to leave my family. Imagine this like that. I don't want to leave my family, and I do want to go abroad to study. Imagine these two parts are in conflict with each other, right? If I go abroad, if I care for my family and they need me because I have to be responsible for them, and they're the ones that have shown me so much love and care. That's the conversation one part is saying. And the other part that is saying is like saying that you have to take care of yourself and you have to take care of your own needs and you want to be able to kind of move forward and live your own life. And we are always in sometimes of this conflicts within ourselves. And in therapy sessions, what we do is we have those kind of conversations and we share these different parts of ourselves with the therapist. Okay. Now the therapist is kind of working with them and really trying to explore. However, what happens is that whenever one side talks, it's always like the other side is kind of interrupting it. So whenever you have a client that says, "Okay, I want to talk about whether I'm confused whether I want to move or whether I want to stay." Imagine if that's something that's there, you know. And so the therapist is like, "Okay, can you share with me what's your thought process behind it?" And then the client goes into, okay, I really want to stay because I care for my family and I think it's good to stay here and all of those things. What happens is that I also want to go and it's very important for me to go. I really care for my family and I really can't. So you can see that there's a consistent interruption that is kind of happening. right? That the mind is racing in such a speed that it's not letting any resolution kind of take place because there is certain discomfort and emotions that are happening. So when these kind of situations takes place, a gestalt is something that can really give it space. Rather than it being internalized, it can be put into two separate chairs, right? And when you put these two parts into two separate chairs, you're actually giving each of these parts space. And as the facilitator, you're helping both the parts find a conversation or find a resolution. That's what you're kind of going into. Yeah. So that's one of the benefits of having a gestalt in your toolkit, right? If you have a gestalt in your toolkit, you can really exaggerate, and that's what this is, right? Like an internal conflict that we're doing, we're really exaggerating it rather than it being part of an internal monologue, we're giving it two chairs, right? That's an exaggeration that is taking place. Similarly, one of the things that in terms of exaggeration that kind of happens is that you have the one of the common ones are the leg shake. So you have the leg that is shake, right? You have the leg that is trying to kick, right? And what you do is you try to get it in the gestalt in order to resolve it. You tell the client extend it, right? What do you really want? If you were to really exaggerate it, what do you think is happening? I want to kick. Okay. What do you want to kick? I want to kick away. Who do you want to kick away? I want to kick away you, right? I think the feelings that you're making me feel, I want to really just kick you away from that, right? So there is this kind of trust that you have to allow that to happen. Look, what will happen if you kick me away, right? Like imagine what would you feel once you finally kind of kicked away, right? And that's what kind of takes place. Yeah. So we exaggerate so that the client, absolutely, we exaggerate so that the client reaches static point, right? Yeah, stated point. Well, there is a certain release that takes place when they're finally allowed to say what their body is saying. Okay. There is a conversation that is happening. If there is anxiety, there's a restraint that's kind of happening. And so what happens is there's a restriction that's been placed onto the client, which could happen because of culture, conflict, values, many different things. There is a reason why the client feels it's unsafe. Either I'll be judged or I'll be rejected, I'll be abandoned, whatever their thought process is. However, when as the gestalt, you're allowing that space to, right? Go for it. I am, as the therapist, you're having this capacity and trait that I am safe within myself, no matter what you say or do. Right? It's only when you're in that capacity that I am safe no matter what you do. You are not going to take it personally when the client says, I'm going to kick you, and you're making me feel discomfortable. Because if that safety wasn't there, what's going to happen is the therapist is going to be like, I'm so sorry, I did not mean to. Are you okay? I'm so apologize. I did not mean to kind of cause you any harm. I'm so sorry. And the client would be like, no, 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 I shouldn't have said it. And the client goes back to kind of being anxious and contained and feeling unsafe again, right? And that's where, in order to become a Gestalt therapist, you have to have so much trust in yourself. Not ego, not narcissistic kind of things, but this capacity that you have the capacity to feel safe no matter what the client says. That the client's process is the client's process. And it has very little to do with you. They're projecting things onto you, but that is still a projection that they have. And only when you're able to separate your own psyche or your own work from the client's work, transferential cleanup, right? Will you feel like you're a safe gestalt therapist? Because even if they tell you that I feel that you are making me feel feelings that are kind of uncomfortable and I want to kick you, you're going to not take it personally and still be curious and be like, okay, what is the feeling that is coming up and what would happen if you finally do kick me? Would you feel better? Would you feel a release? Would you feel that, and was I the only person you wanted to kick, or is there any other people that you felt you wanted to kick? Right? So there's a lot of this information that can come that can help create that resolution of the process. Okay. So that's Gestalt, right? Gestalt is dynamic in nature. It requires a lot of trust in yourself. It requires a lot of trust in the process, right? And what you do is you release the energy from the body. So usually what you will notice is that there's a peaking and then there's a releasing that takes place, right? And you've got to allow that to happen, right? Like for example, even when we do this empty chair. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know the content that's going to come up. Whatever's going to happen is going to be the way it was supposed to happen. Whatever comes up in terms of the resolution, it will just be a part of the peaking and releasing. And all you've got to do is just help in the facilitation of it. I'm just trying to find if there's another chair. Okay, so there are a few ways to do the empty chair, and I'm going to go into that in detail. There's an NLP version of it. So the NLP version of it, what it does is that it doesn't require a lot of interruption, right? Facilitation. And then there is a psychodynamic kind of version of it, which requires facilitation, or not requires, but is you can facilitate the process. Imagine if you're doing like family therapy, particularly. So that's what it is. Okay. So I'm going to show you how I do it and how I give the instructions, right? So imagine I'm going to stand, okay, and you can see in the Gestalt work particularly, you can have the standings and all of those things take place as well. Okay. I hope that you guys can still kind of hear me. Yeah. Yeah. So what's going to happen is that imagine I'm on this chair, right? And there's a client on the chair, and I can kind of talk to them. And I imagine if I'm sitting, if I was in this chair, and I would have told them that, okay, so imagine if On wants to bring in, what do you want to bring in? Let's do anger. That's a good one. Imagine On wants to bring his anger into the room. Okay, so On sitting here, and what he has kind of what we've discussed with him is that we're going to bring anger into the room. So the instructions that I'm going to give On is simple, right? I'm going to tell On that On, whenever you're on this chair, you're going to talk as On. You're the one starting and leading the room. Whenever you go onto this chair, you're going to talk as the anger. Okay. You can go back and forth on this chair as many times as you want. As long as in the end, you will always end on the chair as On. Okay. The intention behind this is to have a conversation in which, in the end, you finally reach your resolution that you're looking for. Once you've completed that process and you've reached that resolution, what I'm going to invite you to do is I'm going to invite you to stand right next to me and just replay the whole conversation in your head, taking away all the learnings that you feel are important. And once you're done, we can go back into the chair. Yeah. So that is the breakdown of the instructions. Slow, clear, concise, right? It's in the recording, so you guys can kind of look back into it as well. Okay. That's the version I kind of use. Okay. Sometimes what happens is that the rooms are small, right? And there are already two chairs in place. So sometimes what happens is the therapist has to move and has to be on the standing here while the client is kind of moving from one chair to another, right? Because sometimes the rooms aren't that big that you have a third chair available as well. That's number one. Okay. Number two, don't be afraid to stand. You can allow the client sometimes an instruction. So imagine the client is sitting here, you're sitting in the therapist chair, and you're just telling them, okay, and you kind of debrief that you've already set out that we're going to do a Gestalt today, we're going to do an empty chair today, this is what we're going to do. I'm just going to stand up and give you the instruction. So you reframed it. And what that does is it sets them up for predictability as compared to just, right? That makes a lot of things unpredictable. But just by saying that, I'm just going to stand up and then give you the instructions of how the Gestalt will work. That makes a huge difference, right? Because by default, Gestalt is supposed to be in the moment, right? And you have a whole room that you are working with, not just the chairs, right? And so it requires that awareness, the peripheral spatial awareness is very actively required when you're working with a Gestalt, in terms of, are you in the client's line of sight, right? You're not standing behind the client. You're not standing too close to a chair, right? You're standing in a space which is very actively in the middle, right? Why? Because you don't want to be like, I'm on your side, right? Go for it. It's not bashing anger. Whoever or whatever part is sitting on the chair that part is in service of the client. Okay, you're not here to kind of take sides, right? You're here as a arbitrator, facilitator between two people, right? And those are some of the biases that are very important to have prior to even doing a gestalt like this, right? Because what happens for a lot of people is that there is this kind of assumptions that whatever is being thrown onto the chair is a rejected IFS standard. If you use IFS language, protector, firefighter, right, or an exile part. Simple language is it's something that the client is trying to get rid of. Okay. However, anger still has a purpose. Okay. As a therapist, you know that no part or no hissa of the client is broken. Client is not broken. If you don't know that, surprise, surprise, right? Client is not broken, right? The client is not broken at all. If they have challenges with anger, there's a reason why it's so intense, right? And so it requires an understanding for it to create integration. Okay. If the challenge is with grief and forgiveness, and there's, for example, the client is stuck in grief, and you put a grief in front of the client, we're going to do a whole day on grief, and that's a separate thing. But hypothetically, if you put grief in front of the client, what's going to happen is that you're going to let the you can't remove grief. You have to let it speak in order for the client to understand what is the purpose it serves, right? And the time it needs in order for there to be resolution and integration to take place. Okay. So whenever you are facilitating an empty chair, do not take sides. Don't get swept away with, oh, the therapist, need to support the client, and thus I have to bash the part that the client is also rejecting. No, neither can you be like, why don't you decide to resolve this right now? You should make friends with it. You should really kind of create. No, you're a neutral party. It's their journey, and that's the part they're trying to integrate. There's a reason why they have gone into this process. And so it's very important because I've seen this happen a lot of times when it comes with therapists, is that when they start interrupting the process, or what happens is that when the client gets stuck, they are not able to facilitate and create a resolution that is required for the benefit of the client. Only once the resolution is happened, that's the purpose of this. Okay, so we're going to start. I hope the debrief and all of that stuff was instructed. If at any time during the process you guys see me stand, I'm going to stand as the facilitator. However, I'm going to try and do it as the client and the person. So, all right. So now what's happened is I've just gotten the instructions. Now this is on Ali the client, and I'm going to just provide that exercise for you guys to show. One other thing I'm going to invite you guys to do is if you guys have that energy or capacity, try this for yourselves, right? Like try having two empty chairs with you and go for it. Put a part of you that you feel that you want to work with or you want to find resolution with, and then have that space, right? And if you would notice the challenges that come up, in terms of maintaining a trance, all of this requires a trance. And Milton Erickson's trance, right? What does that mean? That means that it works when you believe and you really allow it yourself. You let go of your apprehensions. And I'll show you this, right? So imagine I've just given myself this, and I'm kind of sitting and I'm kind of going into it's a client mode, and I'm going to just have this kind of role play here. So I have the therapist who's kind of asking me in terms of, okay, what would you like to say to the anger? Okay. So I would like to say that I'm not really sure why you are here and why you're so intense. I sometimes think that you are also someone who is selfish and self-centered, and you don't think that you are there to. I don't think you are there to serve me or help me. I think you are here sometimes to just make sure that I'm safe and I'm protected. However, I wanna be here and I wanna tell you that I don't need you anymore, or I don't need you anymore with this level of intensity. I think I need you to kind of dial it down so that I'm able to live my life in a more effective kind of way possible. Yeah. Yes, I hear you. I hear that you're trying to tell me that I'm not needed and I'm not but I'm really glad that you're saying that you understand that I'm here to kind of protect you because that's what my role is. I'm gonna make sure that the stuff that has happened for you in the past, those things don't happen again. I am also responsible for your body in terms of how safe you are and all of those things. It's very important for me to make sure that you are taken care of. So no matter what you say, I'm still going to be here and I'm going to make sure that you are safe, regardless of any kind of process or any kind of, even if you try to exclude me, you can't do it because I'm just going to be here. You see, this is what I'm trying to say, right? That there is no conversation that kind of happens between when I'm trying to say something, right? It's very much like my way or the highway, or there's a very strong intensity of it being specifically the way you want it. And I don't think that is something that will I appreciate, right? I think there has to be some flexibility because when you go into this kind of zone, and you're kind of very determined and all of that stuff, I just feel like there's no flexibility around it. And I think that's something that I really kind of don't enjoy, right? You need to really understand that I am not the same person that was not able to protect myself before, and I'm actually someone who is able to protect myself now. And this energy that you have in terms of being like this one track minded cannot. I don't think this is something that we can resolve or kind of work with because it just gives no space, right? I need to be able to, you need to be able to kind of slow down and create some space as well because it's just so tiring. It's just so tiring having this kind of guard up all the time. I hear you. I hear, yes, and I agree with you. It is exhausting, right? It is super exhausting for there to be so much um, uh, defensive, right? Always kind of being turned, always being active, right? However, how do you know? How do you make sure that this doesn't happen again, right? You are trying to say to me that you're not the same person anymore, and I hear that. I hear that you're able to kind of protect yourself now. However, I'm still sometimes scared, right? I think that guard is needed, and I think it's important for there to be that kind of energy available. And that's something that I feel is very important for us to kind of take place. But I'm too scared. I don't think I'm going to be able to turn this off the way you want it. I'm just not ready yet for my guards to kind of come down. Yeah, I hear you. I hear that you're scared. And again, right, my intention is not to say that you are not needed anymore. My intention is to say that there has to be more flexibility. The work that and I appreciate how much you have been able to protect me and all the stuff that you've been able to give to me, right? I'm not saying how that there's no use or effectiveness for you. I'm just trying to say that your power of being one track minded has to be used in a manner that is more usable or effective. Like it can't take away my flexibility in thought process. I can't be one track minded, but especially when it's anger. I have to be able to listen and be open as well. And I need you to be able to do that for me, right? So that you and me are on the same page here. Yeah, okay, I get that. I get that you're trying to, that this is something that you're looking for. I'm scared still. I don't think this is something that I was ready for. I didn't imagine you to have such clarity. So what I'm getting is that you're not telling me to go away. What you're telling me to do is be more open and breathable or at least audible in terms of what people are saying so that I'm not one track minded and actually hear other people. Is that what you're looking for particularly? Yes, this is what I'm looking for, and I want you to kind of come out when you're needed, right? Obviously, there are times when anger is needed, you're needed, and so I need to come out when those moments are there. But trust me more, right? That's what I'm really asking. Like, trust me more to be able to kind of handle things and resolve them the way I need you to resolve them. Okay. All right. Okay, sure. Fine. I hear you. That was the test. Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. So now I'm going to facilitate that process of having that conversation take place amongst that, right? So I'm going to take that, have that kind of done. So I'm just going to overview that. I'm going to come back as the client. All right. So that is what it looks like. Okay. And again, this is done by someone, I'm hoping, is regulated, right? And resourced. It's not going to be that easy all the time, right? Sometimes you will have facilitation that is going to be required, right? You're going to have things that are going to be required. My intention, ask the questions, right? Is there, let me see. Yes, is there a possibility of not achieving resolutions in the session? It's a very good question. And the only reason for that is the client wasn't resourced enough, right? Or the not just that the client wasn't resourced enough, it's just a perspective that is happening, right? Like what I have been able to see is that if there's a right kind of question that is asked, that creates the right kind of opening, like a sahi dhaga pakadna, right? Like really just finding the right string. It does make a huge difference, right? And you'll be surprised that usually why this challenge comes up is because the string that needs to be opened up isn't being opened appropriately. That's what I've seen. But yes, it can happen. You can kind of have an unsuccessful resolution, or it doesn't feel like it's resolved. It feels like वो बात छुपी हुई है, or the conversation hasn't fully taken place, or it's not done. And you can just take that as information. Not all interventions are going to work all the time, right? You try something, it doesn't work, try something else, right? Your intention is to have enough tools in your toolkit that you will find the one that fits the client the best, right? I'm not gonna do this because I want it to be I'm not gonna do an empty chair because I want to do an empty chair. I'm gonna do an empty chair because I think it'll benefit the client. Okay. So those are the differences that you want to be able to kind of really clearly make, right? In terms of why is this empty chair actually being done? Number one, is it my need or the client's need? Number two, and if it is the right tool for the client in that moment, what's helping me come to that conclusion? How come I'm seeing it that way, right? So those are all the evaluations that have to be done. And if it doesn't work, no problem. However, my intention is to show you all the ways that it can work, right? And what are some of the subtleties that you have to be mindful for when it is working? It's a really good question, right? And what if the client experiences heightened emotions during the shift in the role, such as apprehensions or frustrations? Can we do like an intervene or allow them to resolve it on their own? Yes. So in that kind of situation, right? Imagine if when I was doing this kind of role play, imagine if I wasn't resourced enough, right? Or I wasn't regulated enough, right? Or I hadn't built the relationship with the therapist enough for me to trust this process taking place. Imagine if it was done too soon in the therapeutic work. Imagine if it was done too in a manner that wasn't facilitated well. So many reasons why it was, right? Okay. Now imagine that because of that, one of those reasons, I am not feeling fully safe and I'm dysregulating in front of the anger. Right? This is where therapeutic judgment kind of takes place. Okay. Do you recognize why? Because you're sitting in this video, I can't see, but a therapist is standing here in this room, right? And what happens is that when the therapist is standing in the room, there is energy of holding the space, right? There is a regulated holding the space that you are doing. You're not gonna go like, you're not chilling out here, right? You're really using your physiology, quiet, regulated. If you feel like there's an intervention, so what happens is there's already this co-regulation that is taking place between the client and the therapist consistently. However, if that attunement is not done, the client will feel alone and they will dysregulate because even if there is an imaginative kind of process that takes place, you'll be surprised of how powerful these things are. I think what happens is that people can learn more from failures rather than successes, and that's what's true for me as well. I have done many empty chairs, many of them. Not all of them were successful. Some of them failed, and some of them failed really bad, right? However, I still feel that at the right time, having this in your toolkit is an amazing tool, right? And the times when it's not working out, you will get something from it that will help the client's process. There'll be a reason why it didn't work out, and that's good enough to know. Okay. How can we assess in our clients is suitable candidate for an empty chair technique? So there are a few ways, right? Number one could be tell them about the process, right? Tell them about the process. There's this technique called empty chair, right? Would you be interested in doing it? It's about like, you notice this conflict that's consistently in you. There's this kind of anger part that wants to be expressed, but there's this kind of suppression of it happening all the time. How would it be like if we let it talk? How would it be like if we put it in front of a chair? Would that be interesting? It's a gestalt, meaning that it requires a little bit of imaginative work, right? So what will happen is that you will kind of go from one chair to another, and anytime you'll be on that chair, you will talk as anger. It really does give resolution, especially because the ending is always done on you, so by you sitting on the chair having that resolution, right? So, or at least trying to find that resolution. Would you be interested in it? Okay. If they say yes, they're the right candidate for it. If they say no, don't do it. Simple. Simple. You will be surprised on how effective consent can be, right? As soon as you've gotten consent from the client, there is a buy-in that is there with them, right? So even if it is not the final resolution, but just because they agreed to it, there is an autonomy or a what do you call it, a step forward that they have taken in their own therapeutic journey, which is coming from their place of empowerment, right? And so just that consent of, I don't know what this empty chair is, I trust you and I trust the relationship. Sure, let's try it. Whatever happens next happens next. And I hope it works, right? And so, one other thing is, it will work better if you've tried it for yourself, right? And you will notice the places where you will get stuck or the stuff that you're not able to let go of, right? This is to coming from 10 years of therapy, right? So this is me having this chair, having talking to anger, which is a real problem, but I'm talking from a place of 10 years of therapy, right? So it's easier if we kind of do it on ourselves first. Can you perform a demo with for our clients? No, right? Because that takes too much time, right? The reason why we don't do a demo for our clients is because that is their paid time. You don't do a demo for the client. You do it with the client, right? They're not paying for them to see you do it, right? My intention for doing it with me and having this is because that's you get to learn it this way, right? I get to show you some of the nuances of the work. So that's one of the reasons why it's there. And yeah, and all of these are really good questions because this really helps you to really understand just the power of this one technique, right? Because at this moment, empty chair is just one of the Gestalt techniques that we're kind of working with. Okay. What else, right? Facilitation wala part, right? So sometimes it's okay to give the client a nudge. In this process, I wasn't able to show you, but for example, something like, is there anything else that you like to say? Simple, right? Imagine if I'm sitting on the client's chair and you're kind of feeling that like na puri baat nahi boli ja rahi, right? Like for example, it's everything is being said, but there is this kind of underlining. It is a performance that's happening because that is something that can take place also. The client the trance could be weak, right? The trance for the session itself could be weak because they're seeing that they're being judged or they're seeing, and so what happens, it's very important for you to be fully present in the space. And sometimes you can even nudge them by asking them a question that, is there anything else that you would like to say? Right? And that could just help or prompt them saying something that will complete release their stuff that needs to be released or complete that process. That is the same thing that you can even prompt for the part that's there. You can even let the part say this same question, right? Is there anything that you would like to say? And so it's important to do it two ways, not one way. Okay. Was it helpful in understanding this kind of gestalt? And I'm sure that if you guys watch it and review it, it is a really powerful tool, really powerful. And I think it was one of the first tools that I got. Like, I remember there was a training that was done by Lynn, right? She was the CPPD head at that time. This is 8 years ago. And what she did was, yeah, and what she did was she did like eight, I think we were eight people in that workshop, and she did eight back empty chairs. It was amazing. I was one of the participants in it, and it was amazing because it was dynamic, powerful, fast, and resolution based. And the reason why it worked was because, at least I can speak for myself, I trusted her, right? It worked because I trusted her, right? It would not have worked if it was anyone else doing it, at least in that room or in that moment, because she had that aura that no matter what comes my way, I can handle it. And Gestalt is a specific technique that requires that aura. No other, I have never, I've seen, I've done so many different modalities and work and all of those things. Jitna self-belief Gestalt mein chahiye hota hai na, you like, there's no other modality that kind of requires that, because you have to have trust at a level that is spiritual in nature, very spiritual in nature. It is very spiritual in nature. So you have a super godly kind of trust, right? Because in what? In yourself first. And everything is going to work out. Trust the process, right? And in the clients and their capacity to self-regulate and reach those levels. And you can't fake those things, right? That's the worst part. You can't really fake a gestalt. If it works, everyone knows that it worked because there's a sense of resolution or lightness that's there. If it didn't work, everyone knows it didn't work. So what you do is you don't hide, right? So for example, just in case a gestalt did not work, I go like, imagine the therapist is sitting on the chair and I'm the client and I go like, what was that? That was horrible. I did not get anything out of it. I think what I got was more activation, right? And in that moment, if the therapist is getting a huge shame attack, right? Take a minute, right? Hey, I didn't realize it wouldn't have worked. My bad. Was there anything that you found of value? And do you think it was or do you think it was a time that you didn't find any value in? It's okay, right? It's absolutely okay for things to, and this could be just, it's not just this, right? This could be any technique, EMDR, IFS, anything. It all depends on the therapeutic alliance. That makes a huge difference. Okay. So we did a demo for empty chair just now, and I hope it was clear in terms of its instructions that are required, time that it happens, when does it not work, all of those things, right? And highly recommend it. Highly recommend. Even if you're not doing therapy for yourself, you do it for yourself. You will notice, you will find, hopefully, I hope that you find some information from it about yourself. Okay, what are you ready for? What are you not ready for? And both of those things will give you some form of value. Okay. Now, let's go back. Let's go a little bit more in terms of resistance. Okay. What happens when it's not just that the fact that it didn't work, it's just that the client is not even interested in there's active resistance, right? So being in the moment requires is causing active resistance. When does resistance takes place? When there is an ego that's being threatened, okay? When the therapeutic alliance isn't fully there, right? When the client doesn't feel safe with you in the room, right? So all of those things are reasons why there is active resistance taking place. This could be overtly, and this could be covertly. Okay. Overtly se murad kya? What does it mean when it's overtly there? So if it's overt in nature, that means that your language that you're using could be punitive or shame-based, and that language could be creating a certain kind of wall. Okay. For example, client, I've heard this, that's why it's sad. Client therapist says to the client, what do you think is wrong with you? What do you think is wrong with you? I'm like, right? So you can see, right? There's so much shame that's in that sentence, right? And it happens a lot, right? What do you think is wrong with you? That's number one. Another example of that could be, another example of that could be, what, another example for that could be, what are some of the, why do you even come here, right? If there's nothing that you want, if there's nothing that you feel it's going to happen, why are you even coming to therapy? Right? Sometimes the therapist gets so frustrated that they are then the resistance that they're consistently seeing in the client, in order to break it, they dysregulate, obviously, but like they shame, right? They shame, right? Because they're just so frustrated with the resistance that is coming consistently in the work that they're doing. They think there's no progress, but what they're really upset about is how the client is making them feel about themselves. I don't like this feeling of not being able to help someone. And because I don't like this feeling about me not being able to help someone, shame on you. Okay, it's huge. It's huge, and it's very active, and sometimes it's quite uncomfortable for the therapist as well to recognize that this is something that's so actively there. Because without, and so what happens is there's a scapegoating that takes place on the client. Client is not willing to work. The client is resistant, right? And that's why they need to be transferred off to. I'm not doing anything. I'm solid. Not done anything, right? And that is a challenge that comes in because the perspective of resistance is punitive towards the client, right? And my intention is to kind of bring it into your awareness that resistance is information about the relationship that you have with the client, right? Rather than yes, and also you're absolutely right. We're quick to jump to labels. So one of my favorite labels that I noticed therapists kind of very quickly jump to is depression, the fun ones, right? Depression, anxiety, ADHD, all of those things, right? Those are the ones that are those are very, very culturally accepted. And there is this phenomena called treatment resistance depression, right? And so what that means is that no matter how much medication has been provided to the client is unable to come out of their depressive state. Okay. When you start, again, this is a change that has happened for me that when I started working from a trauma informed lens and I started working from a space which was more about shifting the client's perspective, what happens was that there was a difference in the way, there was a difference in which I understood treatment resistance, right? Resistance is technically the client in a freeze state, right? And as long as the client is in a freeze state, there is lack of mobility or lack of change and a lack of energy that takes place. Okay. And all of these things are quite visible. What that means is that if, okay, let me give you an example. If I have gone into a freeze state, and we'll go into this content about fight, flight, and freeze later into the training. But if I am in a freeze state, what happens is that my nervous system is in the shutdown mode. Okay. Shutdown meaning low energy, lack of motivation, lack of taste, lack of hope about the future, binary thinking, right? Unwilling to engage in social activities, unwilling to have the energy, right? Literally checking out all the symptoms for depression. Okay. Depression is, again, depression is a symptom and a diagnosis, right? So yeah, I'm feeling a depressed state, right? So technically, it's what is happening is that your nervous system is going into a freeze state. If I don't understand this, I don't have this language. What happens is that what I start to see is that the client is unwilling to work with me. However, the reality is that I am not willing to adjust myself to meet the client where they are at. Okay. And that is a very important concept when we need to understand or work with resistance. Okay. Resistance has very little to do with the client. Okay. It has a lot more to do with attunement, which we've talked about in detail in the first few sessions, right? And understanding what is the capacity that the client really has at this moment. And thirdly, transference. And that's what we're going to go into in the next few sessions also. Okay. So that's some of the things that are working with resistance, right? Another few elements that are very important to understand when we're working with resistance is that there is this capacity of asking questions that the client might give an answer for, which is, I don't know. Okay. After how many sessions, it's a good question that comes in. After how many sessions can we think that there might, so I have a question here. Do you think someone who has resistance has also agreed to come to therapy, right? So isn't that counterintuitive, right? Because technically, if they have agreed to come to therapy, right, what does that imply about whether they're willing to change or not? Okay. That's what I'm trying to say, right? Like if you've tried a few things and yes, there's a willingness to change, right? However, if the nervous system is in a freeze response, no matter how willing you are, the body is not ready to make the change. So the client is saying, yes, I want to. The body is saying, no, not yet. Right. And then that disparity is where the people get stuck because they don't have that vocabulary. Right. And what is really happening is not that the client is resistant, it's just that the treatment that is being provided to them is ineffective. Right. And the treatment that's being provided to them is having this expectation that the client has to rise to the level of the therapist ego, right? Rather than the therapist having to go down to the level of the client. Right. And that is something that, again, has been very commonly visible. Right. And again, I just want to share that this is coming from an experience that I've built and what I've learned from Arizona primarily is that when someone is in your therapy room, that is a statement of intent about, I want to come and I want to do some work about myself. Okay. The real work then becomes finding the right therapist. Because I don't know how many of you guys have had that phone call with the therapist and how much like anxiety that first phone call really creates, right? When you're not sure who the therapist is and you've just dropped them a message and it's your first time in your life where you're actually kind of saying, oh my God, what is therapy and how I'm going to go into this? Imagine the client has gone through all of that when they're coming and sitting in front of you, right? So when you're talking about resistance, they've done all of that stuff. No matter what diagnosis or what mindset that they're coming with, they have made that initial, oh my God, are you the right therapist for me? Can I come and see you at this date? And if you're seeing in person, the traveled and seen you. Okay. Now, if you're noticing that a few sessions have happened and the client isn't willing to make a shift, then it has more to do with your attunement. And I think that CBT day, the day we did CBT, the day we did that training, that's the training that we really talked about. That any kind of cognitive suggestions that are required to be implemented requires a certain state of regulation and a prefrontal cortex activation, right? And if I haven't really activated my prefrontal cortex, I'm going to call it resistance, right? Because I'm giving them homework and I haven't really accepted the fact that they're not ready for that work. Okay. So imagine all of that stuff is still in play and the client you're noticing is resistant, right? So my intention is to really help what can help create those breakthroughs for you, right? What can help create those shifts for you? Imagine you're aware of the prefrontal cortex thing, right? So you know that that's the intention you are wanting to move towards. You want to ask clients evaluative questions that can help them become more alert and aware and thus create those changes for themselves. So how do you do it? Okay. Number one, there's a certain characteristic that is required from the therapist side. Okay. Other than trust in self, trust in the client, and trust in the process, like other than that elements, which are not easy to get to, I just want to say that developing those things aren't easy. And I hope you guys do put the effort in to do that. Persistence. Persistence is such an amazing technique, right? Not technique. How do I say this? And as nicely as possible, and I hope I say it rightly, right as well. Okay. You have to really believe in the client's capacity of changing, even if the client doesn't believe it themselves, right? Like you have to be the one that has hope, not false hope, not hope of, not a fool's hope, SNE, without evidence hope. No, it's not what's being asked, right? Just the fact that you know how a nervous system works, right? Or the fact that you've seen clients get through things. Yes, our clients has all the resources within themselves. Absolutely. Humanistic, most therapies have this belief, right? Everything that you need is already within you, right? So that information is not just talk. You really believe it, that no matter, not foolhardy, there's a difference. And how I want to be able to share this with you with as much clarity as possible, that the difference in tone is visible if you're coming from a place of, I've been told to believe in you and thus I'm believing in you, compared to, I've lived my own experiences and I've seen the people around me and I know how resilient human beings are in general. And I know, and if you try and if you make an effort, if you already come to therapy, steps are going to be possible for you to do also, right? That is the difference. You don't overtly say it to the client because that's not the role. However, you believe it in you, right? You have to believe it, right? And if you don't believe it, you're not going to persist. Because what's going to happen is that if you ask a question to a client that they could be resistant to, for example, um, something like, give a question, right? That the client could be resistant to. Do you feel that you're ready to accept, let's do family members, right? Do you feel ready to kind of forgive, not forgive, let's do easy ones. Do you feel that you're ready to kind of allow the grief to take place or grieve something, right? Do you think you're ready to grieve? Simple. No, I'm not sure. Okay. Or do you think, are you ready to kind of make this change in your life? No, I don't think so. I'm not sure. Okay. What happens most of the times when the client says this is that the therapist backs off. He's not sure. Give him space, right? That's the energy, or that's the fear technically they have, because they don't want to push. Gestalt is all about the push, right? Gestalt is all about the push, man. Gestalt is all about maintaining the therapeutic alliance and really kind of allowing the client to do more than they believe that they could have done because you believe that they could do it as well, right? And this is all happening on a non-verbal level. This is all not overtly said. You don't say to them, pat on the back, no, no, I trust you, you can do it. You're not a cheerleader, right? You're not there to cheerlead them. You believe these things internally and they are being expressed in the tone that you're using. Not, आप कर लोगे, आप कर लोगे. You're not doing that shit. That's not Gestalt. That is codependency. You don't want codependency here, right? You want to be in a Gestalt state, which means that you really understand how the mechanism works. And thus that is what gives you the confidence. And so when you ask the client a certain question and they say, I don't know, you don't back off. You go like, okay. So for example, if someone says, are you ready to make the change? And they go like, I don't know. You go like, okay, have you ever thought about it though, right? In terms of what it will take, right? You're still on the topic. No, I haven't really thought about it. I'm not really sure. Imagine if I'm acting like a client that's resistant, right? I'm not really sure. I don't know what it takes. Would you be open to thinking about it? Um, I don't think so. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure that this is something that I might be open for also. Is there something coming up for you right now, even as I'm kind of asking this question? Is there some emotion that's coming up? Yeah, it's anger. I'm actually feeling quite angry the fact that you're consistently asking me the same question, and I've just said I don't know. I don't. So what you're really saying is that if I'm hearing it correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, that I don't know means I don't want to. Yeah, I think that's what it is, right? I really don't want to, right? Because I don't want to make this change right now. I don't want to create this kind of difference. I want to just be able to feel accepted about whatever my feelings are, and that's what I really want to do. Okay, let's work with it. Let's find that way of finding acceptance. Okay. Do you see the energy, right? Like there's a certain, remember we talked about it in the start, there's a certain peaking that happens and then a releasing that takes place. And you could see that as I was consistently asking the questions, right, there was a certain kind of arousal that was taking up in the client, right? And that, again, attunement, very important, right? That attunement is very important because if you are internally anxious, right? And you're badgering the client, not going to work, right? But if you have a relationship with the client that you're attuned to, and then you can ask the questions and you're not afraid of the arousal, it really helps with the breakthroughs. Is there any possibility that we can make our clients averse towards such questions, topics by probing? Okay. Yes. And aversion is not a bad thing. Probing is the bad thing, right? My intention is not to probe. There's this technique called motivational interviewing, right? And all I was doing was asking questions. All I was doing was asking questions. I wasn't blaming or shaming. I wasn't saying, why are you not willing to do this? Is there any, do you have any issues right now? Is there anything stopping you from doing it? Right? Do you feel unsafe right now? Like you can see that none of my questions were about their lack of capacity, right? Most of my questions had this bias that the client was in awareness about their reasons. I was just curious about why what those reasons are. Okay. Let me give you another example. Is there, just out of curiosity, would you want, like, is there a participant who's willing to kind of be a resistant client? Let me show you how this is done. So just so that I feel like I think you guys will get it once if it's someone else kind of being on that chair as well. Is there someone else? Again, I want to give a clear disclosure that whoever does it, we're going to put this on YouTube as well. So if you're open, you can kind of just have your audio on if that's something that works. If not, I can just do another role play as well. That's not an issue. Mm, fair, fair enough. Okay, so let me kind of do another one. Okay. So let me show you something that might be a little harder, right? So for example, if there is a client that is activated, right, about the topic. So for example, imagine university is the easy one, right? Like grades and schools and stuff. You know, the client goes like, I don't want to study. It's just, I just don't want to study. I'm just tired. My family doesn't really understand me. I'm done. Like, I really don't want to study, right? And they're just kind of in that zone. Okay. And you're asking the question, your intention is not that you want them to study, you're asking the question like, okay, how can therapy help? Right. And you're like, I'm not really sure, but this is something that I'm not really open for. I was sent to do therapy by my mother, and this is not something that I really want to do. Okay. In this moment, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna use that technique, right? Why? Because number one, there is no therapeutic alliance. Okay. Number two, the client is not safe with therapy in itself. So if I start probing right now, it's going to create an explosion. Technically, it's also going to create an enactment of getting the client to do what she doesn't want to do. Okay. And this is where my attunement comes in, or anyone's attunement comes in, where a clinical judgment is taking place that at this stage, this resistance doesn't get resolved with probing. Why did you still come? Why did you still come? How come you're still here? This resistance gets resolved with giving the client space. I'm here, and this is a space that you have. If you feel like you want to use this space and use this time that we have together, I'm willing to and open to kind of sharing what I know, and I'll be very curious to getting to know you as well, if that is something that you're looking for. Slowing it down. Okay. And so that attunement is very much required. In therapy, you will never have a one size fits all approach. Never. Never. Right? And so when you're working with any sort of resistance, right, it is always good or effective to be mindful of your attunement. Are you safe with the client? Do you have any resistance? Are you feeling challenged by the work that's being provided? Because those are some of the questions that will impact your attunement with the client. And that's something that's very important. Okay. So this is what brings us to our last topic, right? Which is about being in the here and now, right? Because you can see that adjustment that needs to happen, right? That adjustment in terms of do I push? Meaning what? Do I kind of be consistent with my questions and not be afraid of the client? And I know that if I can just be a little, like for example, I'll give you an example. Anytime a client says, I don't know, I say imagine. Simple. Why? We'll cover this later, but I know the fact that they're saying I don't know means two things. Number one, their prefrontal cortex is offline. That's number one, right? What that means is the reason why they're saying I don't know is because literally they don't have access to their brain centers, which are allowing them to think, such as memory and evaluation, right? Jiske wajah se the answer becomes I don't know, which tells me that the session or this experience right now is not safe for them and they're not regulated. Okay. And thus, when they say I don't know, when I say imagine, I'm asking them to use visual centers in their brains. And as soon as they start visualizing those things, their brain will come back online, their nervous system will regulate, and they will start feeling safer. So it's very important. And I know that my intention is to build the relationship forward, do the work, provide the therapeutic services so that I can actually provide effectiveness. However, I've seen a lot of therapists, as soon as the client says, I don't know, the therapist kind of backs off because they're not sure about what they want to do and how they're going to do it. And it's an intense experience that kind of comes in. So that's where the trust and self kind of comes in. Using a hypothetical scenario, we can also explore their perspectives in non-defensive ways. Often we project our own experiences in hypothetical scenarios, imaginations, 100%, right? So absolutely. Um, uh, Imagine if it was your friend who was going through this. That's a really good way of working. This disconnecting the intensity of the emotion to an object, right? Imagine if it was your friend going through that kind of situation. What do you imagine he is going through or she is going through? Okay. As soon as you are highlighting imagine, you are bringing those same brain centers back online. And it's just a matter of working with the client, right? This is how you work with resistance. But it's as long as you're there, right? And you're not giving up. Because sometimes what happens with clients who are in a freeze state, because they are in the given up state, their nervous system is not there. And the therapist is so anxious and they don't want to try anything. They don't try and they go like, okay, I don't want to upset you. You might get angry with me and thus I'm not going to do anything about this. So those are all the things that are there. Okay. So brings me back to the here and now, right? And what is the most important thing or the one of the most important techniques that can help you be present with in the here and now? Okay. Two main things. All of this information is present in the moment. So the challenge is that you have to be very kind of in the moment, in the here and now. What that means is you can't be thinking too much in the session. You have to be trusting and be present. What does that mean exactly? Okay. So imagine I'm a young therapist and I have like been told that I have to sit a certain way, right? I have to make eye contact, right? I have to make sure that I am asking certain questions and I take a history down. What was the first thing that happened? What was the second thing that happened? Okay, what happened next? What happened next? One. Imagine this is what it is, okay? And that I am being graded for it also. What that means is that if I don't do it this way, my teachers are going to come in and they're going to see my notes and they're going to see the papers and they're going to see that I've done it the right way or the wrong way. And they're going to be like, no, 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 no. Right? And I'm going to fail my semester. Okay. Do you think that I'm in the here and now? Or am I with my teacher or in the future that I have to pass my exam and all of those things? Okay. Even though those pressures are very actively presently there. Okay. It's a very common phenomena, which is very active in a lot of therapists about getting it right. Okay. Therapy has very little to do with getting it right? Because there's nothing technically wrong with the client. And that's a bias that I'm going to invite you guys to really believe because as we go into the content, I'm going to give you the science and all of that stuff. There's nothing wrong with the client. Number one. So what happens is that when you are understanding of that mindset, kya acha yaar, whatever happens in my report, I'll do it, I'll get all of that stuff done. I just need to make sure that I get all my information. Okay. So now मुझे को पता है कि मुझे कुछ सवालात क्या पूछने हैं. I'm going to be present in the here and now. And one of the main techniques that is there is number one, introspection. Check in with your body. Okay. Can I feel my back? Can I feel my chair? Can I feel my feet? That's number one. Okay. Is my mind focusing on something else? Or is my mind really present with the client? Okay, that's number one. Introspection, noticing the shifts that are happening inside your body. Number two, and probably the best one, it's called peripheral vision. Okay. Peripheral vision means that even though at this moment I'm looking at myself in the screen and my eye contact is directly there, there is a whole side eye view I have about other things also. I can see, obviously you guys can see it. I have a book, I have a monitor, I have a mic, I have a computer, I have my bag. Even in the background, there's this for those people who are online, there's this table, there's this stuff. Even though I am actively looking at one particular point, there's a whole peripheral vision that I have around me. Okay. And this is the best hack ever. As soon as I start noticing my peripheral vision, my nervous system starts to regulate. You will notice it here. As soon as you expand your vision, what happens is you have more view because in sympathetic, the mind becomes focused on one particular area, right? And as soon as you're expanding your vision, you become much more expansive in all the other areas as well. And by default, it sets the nervous system to come back into the here and now, right? Because you're not just looking at the client's words, you're also looking at their face, you're also looking at their legs, you're also looking at their shoulders, you're also looking at the room, you're looking at the tenseness, and all of these informations become available just because you've kind of expanded your vision. It's the try it out. Like I'll be very honest, you will notice that another technique to do that is that what you do is you bring your fingers kind of, you can actually try it out. What you do is you bring your fingers in, right, in front of you, and you start focusing on your fingers. Now, without moving your neck and your eyes, what you do is you expand the finger to as far as your peripheral vision can see. Okay, and then you bring it back. Okay, and now you do the other side. You're trying to look forward, but you're just trying to see as far as your peripheral vision can see, and you bring it back. Okay, and now you do for both, still looking forward, but you're still trying to use it as far as your peripheral vision can see. Okay, and then you bring it back. Okay, and what you will notice is there's a whole expansion of your, like you're able to see more. As soon as you're able to see more, your nervous system comes back online. And you're in the here and now. What you will notice is that you will notice these subtle details now more, which you can then ask a question about, oh, that's interesting. What's happening there for you? You notice the client kind of just rub their shoulders. How are your shoulders doing in that moment? Do you feel stressed? Does it feel good and supportive when you kind of rub your shoulders? Yeah. Do you want to expand on that? Do you want to just kind of do a bit more of it? Oh yeah, that feels good. Good, good. How's it like for you to provide that care? Yeah, it felt nice. I think I do that a lot in other spaces as well. So it allows that facilitation to take place. Okay. So that was our Gestalt training, right? I really hope that it was a little bit more dynamic. I understand that there were different techniques and stuff that's being used. We were covering topics about resistance, and with Gestalt, one thing I would request on YouTube, there are demos of Fritz Perls, the guy who made Gestalt. Okay, doing demos with Gloria. Gloria is one of the clients, right? So watch that. Okay, what I've seen is that there are people who get activated by it, right? Because he's consistently in that push. And what happens is that Gloria, the client, had therapy with Carl Rogers and with Fletch Pearls, and there was another one, Tia also. And she was asked, right, which therapy modality would you prefer, right? And the answer for her was the Gestalt work, right? So it's so like interesting, right, in terms of how these things kind of play out. And so just notice, right, there's being sort of like a little bit more strong and kind of pushy, does that not align with your values? Do you feel that it's a challenge because it doesn't really kind of feel nice and appropriate? Does it misattune to the therapist and all of those things? So and again, the intention of providing these modalities and the variety that is there is to help you guys figure out which one best works for you. Like, I'll be very honest, my main modality would not be Gestalt, even though I love to work with Gestalt. It's a tool, like an empty chair that I have in my toolkit. It's not my favorite one. Trauma informed, EMDR, IFS, somatic work, right? Those are my like go-tos, right? And so, but it's good to have it with you in the technique. Okay, if I need to use it, can I use it? Right? Can you also ask what your shoulders are trying to say? That's a very good question that we will do in somatic work primarily as well, when you're kind of giving these different parts your kind of language and vocabulary. It's really good as a question. If your shoulders were trying to say something, what would they say? That's a really good one, right? So absolutely, it all depends on the style in which you're working. I also have a question. I'm not sure if I formulated it correctly or not. Is there a possibility our resistant clients become prompt or push dependent on the therapist? Yes, right? And again, what that means is that if I get better, I lose this relationship. That's what that means, right? That if I am going to fix myself, lack of a better word, very lack of a better word. If I'm able to get better, then what happens is that I'm not going to be able to move forward, right? I'm not going to be able to, I might lose this one and only relationship that I have, which I've worked so hard, and this person accepts me, doesn't judge me. And it's so important for you to kind of always be mindful of that, right? That you're not becoming that codependent enabler. And that's one of the reasons why in Gestalt, particularly, I've always working with resistance, I've always kind of brought it back to attunement. Attunement is the most important thing. And if you're noticing yourself or your client becoming dependent onto you, the therapist, then what you do is that in the right way, you open up the topic of grieving the relationship, right? Because it is sad that this relationship is coming to an end, right? And a lot of therapists, and I'll be very honest, a lot of therapists, they don't want it. That's one of the reasons why it takes like 4 or 5 years, right, for the therapy. But now things are becoming much more aware. People are becoming more and more aware. So they are much more understanding that therapy is not a paid friendship, right? And the therapist की भी dependency होती है client के ऊपर, right? And the client is, you've got to be very honest with your work, right? That if you are charging the money, that you need to be able to grieve this relationship also when it ends. The therapist needs to grieve it. And thus, once the therapist grieves it, can the client learn how to grieve it also, right? So that was all Gestalt that's kind of happening. And so that completes the Gestalt training that's kind of taking place. A few things I wanted to kind of share with you guys about the next phase of the training that's going to be covered, right? We're now going to go into psychodynamic and a little bit of the developmental immaturity work and a little bit more of a process-based work, right? So this is where things get a little bit more, not intense is not the right word, but emotional could be a certain level of word, right? My intention is to share all of this stuff with you very openly. So before the next one, I really request you guys, regulate yourself. There on in the manual that's provided to you guys, there is this kind of self-care form, right? And so you fill out, not to fill out, but at least look at the self-care form, right? Because it's important that this stuff you kind of just do take care of yourself, because the next step, we're going to go a little bit more deeper, a little bit more deeper into the psyche, into all the other stuff. And so I really hope that this resources that have been provided to you guys, you start using those, specifically the self-regulation one. That's number one. Number two is we have the trauma-informed therapist training that's going to be starting on the 25th of April. It's specifically designed for therapists. It's specifically advanced training for therapists who are in the field and who are seeing clients, is designed for people who want to become more trauma informed in their practice and want to have a more of an understanding about how trauma informed kind of comes in. So that's number two that's kind of taking place. And number three is that I'm very excited to announce that we're developing a software that's particularly designed for therapists to help them in all of their practice building tasks, from invoicing to billing to client management. Even, for example, there's an AI that's there that's designed to help provide suggestions on what they can do based on the logs of the client and specifically the therapeutic style that they have. So specifically for the next one, I really hope to give a little bit of a demo about the software as well, specifically for the client's portal particularly. So I'm really excited for all of those things. I hope this was fun for you guys. I hope you guys have a really good Eid as well. And I'm going to see you guys next week on Friday with Psychodynamic. So that's going to be fun. Okay. Take care, guys. Have fun. No worries. Thank you, guys. Yeah. Yeah.